We're back again with CBS News senior security analyst Michael Morell, plus Farah Pandith, former special representative to Muslim communities at the State Department. She's now at the Council on Foreign Relations, and American Enterprise Institute's Danielle Pletka. Thank you all for being here. Danielle, I want to start with you. The response to the attacks in Paris should be what for the United States?
I think we need to look at the challenges that we face on the ground, recognize that if we don't do something, we will see what happened in Paris, in New York, LA, Washington, somewhere in the United States. We need to have a clear strategy that addresses the challenge in both Syria and Iraq, but also Yemen, North Africa, Libya. We could keep going here. We need serious partners on the ground. We need more of our own troops on the ground. We need a concerted effort.
Farah, what's your assessment of what we should do?
So there's a military component, John, and certainly that's important, and we can't do without it. But the other half of the strategy is obviously the non-military, and that includes three things. One is when we think about the money, when we think about the momentum, when we think about ideas. One is stopping the ability for money to flow to these terrorist organizations. And that's something primarily government can do, and it's also something to build public awareness about, the ivory trade, the sale of antiquities. There's also a piece in terms of the emotional and psychological momentum that is taking place with this group, moving into the minds of all of us, whether it's fear, whether it's emotions that are moving us in a particular way. But the most critical component is the idea space, and that is what we would call the war of ideas. How do we engage in bringing down the number of recruits so that ISIS doesn't have armies? And because ISIS is using the digital space, we need to build a digital army. And we need to do it proportionally and at scale.
Aren't those things in tension when you're trying to win the war of ideas and you're also using drones to kill, and that whips up lots of anti-American fervor that it would seem to me no number of tweets and Facebook and so forth could overcome what has to be done militarily?
So let's be really clear. What's happening in the ecosystem obviously makes a difference, but there are almost 1 billion young Muslims under the age of 30 across the world. That's the pool from which the extremists are recruiting. And because they're millennials, they're using the digital tools that we all have to move them forward. We have yet to go at this at scale. We have yet to go all in and really create the kind of momentum in the digital space that we need. In order to do that, we need to get credible voices scaled up. There is no scarcity of credible voices. What we are missing is the scale up, the proportional response in the online space. And I'm not just talking about tweets that are going back and forth. I'm talking about ideological influence for these young people who are being lured in by predators online. And we need to think about it like that.
Mike Morell, let me ask you about momentum. As it's been explained to me, ISIS benefits from these successes. So does what the coalition or the United States has to do in retaliation have to have a big kind of showy aspect to it on the military side?
Yeah, I think if you look at the strengths and weaknesses of ISIS, their greatest strength is the sense that they're winning and the momentum that that creates, and the followers that it brings and the foreign fighters that it brings and the radicalization of young people around the world that it brings. That is one of their great strengths. They just benefited significantly from that with the downing of the airliner and with this attack in Paris. So pushing back on that momentum is really, really important.
Danielle, Secretary Clinton said in the debate last night, this cannot be an American fight alone. There's this sometimes semantic but debate about where America's role is in this fight. Martin O'Malley, running to her right in this argument, basically said America has to lead and they'll bring other people along. Give me your assessment of that.
Let me utter the words I've never uttered before. I agree fully with Martin O'Malley. I thought that remark on Mrs. Clinton's part was rather strange. She has always been a proponent of American leadership. When she was Secretary of State, she recommended that the president be more forward-leaning on Syria. Look, we are the only ones with the capacity to actually lead on this fight. Now, should we be alone? Absolutely not. We should be working with parties on the ground. We should be working with allies, but we haven't shown the leadership up to now. We really haven't. Not on refugees, not on fighting ISIS, not on fighting Al-Qaeda, not on helping good guys.
And there's this argument that countries in the region should do their share. You hear it a lot from the administration, the free rider problem. Are they going to be, I mean, can you wait it out long enough for them to do their share? Or again, does the United States have to move and then perhaps bring them along?
Look, this is sort of, football fantasy camp, foreign policy. You know, when you're talking about the Saudis or the Emiratis or the Turks or whoever it is doing their share, what we end up with is foreign policy priorities that belong to the Saudis or the Turks or the Emiratis or the Qataris. And that's the challenge for us. We have a desired outcome here that is actually not the same as the desired outcome of parties in the region. That's why when you subcontract to Saudi Arabia or you subcontract, God forbid, as John Kerry seems to always want to do, to Iran or to Russia, you end up with outcomes that are ultimately dangerous for the United States.
Farah, let me ask you a question here. In response to these kinds of attacks, when you talk about that space, the battle for ideas, is the government doing it wrong? I mean, is there an overreaction that sends a different kind of message?
So I think that there are things that the government has done both in the Bush administration and in the Obama administration to take hold of the ideological space. And there's only, I have to say, only so much you can do in the government space. The way we have to go at it is to look at the armies that we can build professionally outside of government. Those are the credible voices, the former extremists and others who can make a difference. Where can government play a role there? Their money can go to some of the core funding for some of these organizations that are doing it, not in terms of how they message or what they message, but in terms of setting up these organizations to do something. These organizations are working at a pace that is really quite excellent, but they don't have enough money to be able to scale up the way they need to do this. The second piece the government can make a difference is to ask the private sector to go all in with us. That is to say, not partner with government, but to partner with the actors on the ground who can actually make a difference. And the third, by the way, is to say that we can actually go at the ideological war with the kind of will and determination that ISIS has. They aren't sophisticated, they are determined. We need to be determined too.
Quickly at the end here, Mike, the administration says, well, this is a long war. So what do you hear when you hear that from the administration? When they're criticized about the pace on ISIS and taking the fight to ISIS, administration officials says, well, the president always said this was going to be a long war.
There's a difference between the ups and downs in a long war, the victories for us and the victories for them. Difference between that and what is clearly the momentum in their favor, what is clearly them advancing their capabilities.
Thanks so much, all of you. We will be back in a moment with our political panel. And we're back with our political panel. Peggy Noonan is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and a CBS News contributor. And you've seen Jamel Bouie, chief political correspondent for Slate magazine, here before, but this is his first appearance as a CBS News political analyst. Congratulations and welcome to CBS, Jamel. And Nancy Cordes is our CBS News congressional correspondent who sat in a plane seat next to me flying overnight from Des Moines, Iowa. So she has gotten as little sleep as I have, but nevertheless, welcome. Thanks for being here, Nancy.
Good to be back with you, John.
Yes. Peggy Noonan, the debate last night. Afterwards, we did a poll, and Hillary Clinton won in that debate. How did you see it?
I didn't see it as such a clear win, actually, on her part. I suppose she had her moments. So did Mr. Sanders. So did Mr. O'Malley. It seemed to me that they all struggled pretty much with the issue of what to do after Paris with ISIS. And I think Mrs. Clinton had some awkward moments with regard to Wall Street.
Jamel, in our poll overnight, Hillary Clinton, on the question of handling foreign policy, Hillary Clinton came in at 67%, said that she handled it the best. Sanders and O'Malley were far behind Sanders at 22% and then 11% for O'Malley. How much did that matter? How much does that matter? What did you make of the debate?
I think as far as the Democratic primary goes, I'm not sure that it matters all that much. It's sort of a given that Democratic voters trust Hillary Clinton more in foreign policy. She was the Secretary of State. That's long been her wheelhouse. I think for the general election, it matters quite a bit. Like Peggy said, Secretary Clinton had a hard time answering on the question of what do we do after Paris. And I think part of the problem is that she was Secretary of State during the rise of ISIS. And she's hewing so closely to President Obama's administration that she has no room to break out, despite the fact that there's, I think, real evidence that Clinton has a differing view on these questions than Obama does.
Right, but she was not anxious to show that differing view or distance with him. Let's talk about Wall Street here for a moment, and I want to play her response when she was asked about the Wall Street contributions that she gets, and she was hit on, Bernie Sanders hit her saying basically those contributions make her compromised. Let's listen to her response here.
I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
Nancy, in the debate, well, what did you make of that moment?
Well, I think what she was trying to say was, of course, these people support me. I was their senator. I did a good job for them. Why wouldn't they give me donations? But it struck a lot of people as tone deaf because she was essentially saying, because of 9/11, that's why I get millions of dollars. And so we were getting a lot of traffic on Twitter from people saying, you know, that just doesn't sit right with me. Right. And I think, to be honest, when we asked her the question, she was a little surprised because I don't know that she actually realized the way that it came off and quickly tried to self-correct.
Yeah, that's right. You brought up the tweet that had been sent in saying, why did she raise 9/11 in defending herself against Wall Street? Jamel, how much of the Wall Street issue is a real problem for Hillary Clinton, or just one where she's not trusted, but it won't be a real obstacle?
So I go back and forth on this one because I think it's very awkward for her. I think it's a real problem in terms of trying to get these liberal voters to trust her as a nominee. I'm not sure how much in a general election it will matter, given the extent to which the Republicans will be doing quite well with Wall Street as well, and so it's sort of a wash. I think what is really challenging is that there is an answer for this, and it's just not one that Democrats want to hear, which is that Hillary Clinton and her husband were part of a movement of Democrats who are pulling the party to the center. And I think there's a way to make a defense of that, right? To say that, listen, we had 12 years of Republican presidents, we had to do something, and this is the thing that we did. But I don't know that anyone on the Clinton side wants to litigate all of this. And other than litigating it, you're just going to sound awkward. There's no way around it.
I just thought it was one of those great moments in lame debate answers that you could put a reel together, and that would be about number 4. The Clintons are tight with Wall Street. Wall Street is pretty darn tight with the Democratic Party. That is what it is. I understand Bernie Sanders' critiques. That was not a serious answer to a serious critique.
On the other hand, we gave him the opportunity to explain what it is in her record that shows that she's beholden to Wall Street, and he really
didn't really hit that ball.
Part of the macro issue here is that Hillary Clinton is pretty much a generic Democrat in many ways, and so she goes where the party was. When the party was very tight with Wall Street, she was very tight with Wall Street. As the party has become less tight with Wall Street, she is, at least rhetorically, less tight with Wall Street. And that's a difficult position to be in versus someone like Sanders, who is very much an ideologue. This is where I've always been, and this is where I'm never not going to be.
Yeah, but the ethos of the Democratic Party used to be, I'm for the little guy, not for I'm for Goldman Sachs. I mean, if you think about it, she is in a particular position that does need some answers, I believe. Let
me ask you, Nancy, about in our poll of independents and Democrats who are watching, Bernie Sanders didn't do well on the foreign policy front, but on the economic front, Sanders, on the question of who can handle the economy, Sanders came out at 43, Clinton at 40. When it comes to income inequality on that issue, he got 58%, and Hillary Clinton got 31. So on the issues Democrats care about, it was a good night for him.
It was a good night for him, and I think that, you know, the issue of income inequality was really in his wheelhouse. You could almost see him chomping at the bit to get past foreign policy and get into the issues where he's the strongest. Talking about single payer, for example, talking about a $15 minimum wage, which was a really striking debate last night between him saying it should be $15 no matter what, Hillary Clinton saying that could have unintended consequences. I'm more comfortable with $12. But you're right, clearly more Democrats came down on his side.
But working against him was, I believe, the fact that last night, and more strikingly today on your show, Bernie Sanders essentially said a major problem with all of this ISIS stuff and terrorism and what's going at the West is climate change and global warming, which makes him, to many people, look slightly daffy. like someone who doesn't understand what the real subject is and is leaning outside to sort of leftist or progressive nostrums that he can talk about. This is about terrorism. It isn't about climate change and deserts and people migrating because it's hot.
All right, the last word to you, Peggy.
Sorry.
Thanks to all of you, and we'll be right back. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson. We leave you with the voices of New York's Metropolitan Opera and tributes to the people of Paris from around the world.